Good evening. I'm here tonight with John Yates, and a lot of people in the movement know John Yates. But for those that don't know John Yates, John, how would you describe yourself? What would you say you are in terms of your political persuasion, and how long have you been involved in politics?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you asked that, Richard. But lately here in Northern Ireland, we've had I guess, an argument about what our identity actually is. I mean, I've always seen myself as a British unionist, patriotically proud to be British. I mean, I love the country, I love the United Kingdom, and I love my British heritage, I guess. So, for that reason, and having over the years, but having seen that my everything that I've ever believed in has been under attack for ever since I've been a child. And having watched that over the years, I guess I've taken a keen interest in politics and really defending who I am, because it's my birthright to be British, Richard. And I'm not
Absolutely.
going to let anybody take that away from me. And that's the reality. So I guess that, yeah, I'll fight politically. I mean, I'm not talking about doing anything sort of, against the law or whatever, but it'll be anywhere, anytime, any place in order to defend who I am. So hope that answers your question.
No, it does, John. And I mean, I think obviously you've lived in Northern Ireland all your life. I came to Northern Ireland in the 1980s as a young soldier, um, married a girl from over here and stayed. And it was, for me, it was very interesting because it became very, very apparent that even then, that the narrative, specifically in the media, and I think the media has a huge part to play in driving this identity politics agenda. Even in the 80s, the media were against the British unionist loyalist people. They were against the RUC. They were against the British Army. So this is not a new thing. And particularly the BBC. The BBC for many, many years has been infiltrated by the hard left and the far left. And they actually think what they're doing is virtuous. They don't think they don't think they've got a sinister agenda, but that makes them even the more dangerous, because obviously they think what they're doing is a good and righteous thing to do, whereas in fact what they've been doing for the past at least 40 years, I would say, is undermining the very British state that pays their wages and keeps them in a job. And from the point of view of the whole question of identity politics, I was very aware that the conflict in Northern Ireland was based 100% on identity, and actually still is, even though it's now a political conflict instead of a violent conflict. It was 100% based on identity. And very quickly, when we came to Northern Ireland as soldiers, we were kind of told to be impartial. But very quickly, I became very, very aware that we had an enemy, and that enemy was the Provisional IRA and what they were trying to achieve, which was by terror, bomb, bullet, and politics, destroying the United Kingdom. Because I think this is an important point. If one part of the United Kingdom leaves the United Kingdom is no longer a United Kingdom,
That's right.
And so, I mean, would you agree with that, John? Would that be a pretty good analysis, you think, of where we were at in the 80s and 90s?
Yeah, Richard, it was just something that you said there before I go on to the United Kingdom, and the fact that, yeah, you're absolutely right. If Northern Ireland goes, Scotland will soon want to follow suit, and so on
And
and so
vice
forth.
versa.
Absolutely. So that'll be the end of the United Kingdom. Once we go, the United Kingdom will be no longer. And it's been around for quite some time. But one of the things that you just said there, now let me make this absolutely clear before we go on, so that nobody can sort of misconstrue what we're trying to say here. Is that, I mean, I have a lot of friends here in Northern Ireland who are from the Catholic and the nationalist persuasion.
Me too.
And because they believe in something different from me, I mean, it doesn't mean to say that they're not good people, because they are. And, I mean, everybody has the right to their birthright. I mean, here in Northern Ireland, I mean, if people want to be Irish and they want to subscribe to the Southern Irish state, well, so be it. But it just so happens, as I say, that I was born with a British passport, and that's the way that I want to remain. And nobody should be able to take that away from me. And it was interesting that you mentioned the BBC, the media there. And I'm, given the audience that we're speaking to here, I would like to speak about one John Sweeney, who worked for the Panorama crowd. And it's interesting how that, after hindsight's a wonderful thing, Richard. And going back over the years, I mean, I'm around politics sort of, from sort of the late 80s is the reality. And I've been watching this thing. I mean, some people say have you nothing else to do, because I'm totally, I guess, dedicated to watching politics, watching the corruption going on, and absolutely, doing everything I can in order to avert it and stand up against it. And I guess back in the early days, what I used I viewed the BBC as an honourable organisation, and I didn't quite understand even back then how bad that organisation was infiltrated with certain individuals. And I'm going to mention, as I say, back again to John Sweeney and the crowd that he worked for, which was Panorama. And lately, and this is hindsight for you, but lately we had two programmes here in Northern Ireland, one by a man called John Taylor, again of Panorama pedigree. And let me explain to you what John Taylor had says. And this comes out in the Wash in later years. And then you begin to realise who the investigative journalists, so-called, that were investigating the Troubles over the years, who they actually were and what they actually subscribed to. An honest opinion, and I'm going to make a clear statement here, and I'm going to tell you that these people are political activists, and they hate Britain, and they hate the United Kingdom, and they hate our nationality, and they hate everything that we stand for. And those are the type of people that have been at the upper echelons of the investigative journalism over the years. So we had a man, John Taylor, who recently suggested in a program, a BBC program, and he said that if he had been in Londonderry, the Nationalist Republican Friends, or the Nationalist Catholic Friends, they would call it Derry, but if he had been in and around then at the time of Bloody Sunday, he says that he would have joined the IRA. And what sort of language is that coming from a BBC journalist?
He's basically saying he would have become a terrorist, and would have been trying to destroy the very state that pays his wages. It's interesting about Panorama as well, because this is just a personal aside, and I think we were both to some extent involved in this with another couple of individuals, but we clocked the Panorama team at the Brexit demo, and Tommy, and obviously we're talking about Tommy here with the Panorama thing, and Tommy had got wind that the BBC were up to something from some other source. He'd been tipped off that the BBC were up to something, and we were able to kind of narrow that gaze down and say, well, we know that Panorama was showing a very great interest in your presence at the Brexit demo, and so in some small way, obviously we didn't really have anything other to do with it other than just saying, well, because of contacts that we've got, we know that the Panorama team was there. So Tommy was then able to swing into action and totally discredit the said John Sweeney, who said how much he respected Martin McGuinness and eulogized about Martin McGuinness while he was trying to get a young journalist drunk and get information out of her. So, I think that was, obviously I'm not going to labour on that because Tommy's talked about that a lot, and it's an absolutely incredible thing that was done to Panorama, and hopefully they will never recover. But they're still at it. They were lying about the British government again, and using Labour activists on in the most recent documentary about the COVID situation. But I think one of the things, going back to the identity politics thing. When I was brought up in Middlesbrough in the 80s, we were already seeing a huge divergence in the population. So, and the way the divergence worked in those days, it really wasn't black and white. It wasn't a question of race. I used to walk to school every day with Arindam Das. His dad was a doctor. He was an Indian. There was Sikh lads in my school. When I was in the army, I served with lads from West Indian background, some from even from Somali background, funny enough. But the problem we had in Middlesbrough was Pakistani Muslims refused to integrate. They would not get involved in integration. They had their gang and their mafia, if you like. Back in the day, the rumours were that they were heavily involved in the heroin trade, and obviously that's been borne out by the facts of we can look at the crime statistics, and that's borne out by fact. So there was already a growing Pakistani gang culture that was opposing anybody that was that stood against them, and even to the extent that when I went into town on a Saturday afternoon before I joined the army, I would be attacked by gangs of Pakistani youths. And one of my best friends at school was stabbed to death several years later, by the same gangs. So there was already this breakdown of cohesion, if you like, of this sort of the oneness of British culture. And then when I came to Northern Ireland, I saw where it had led with the IRA and the loyalists going at it hammer and tongs. I thought, this is the future of the United Kingdom unless we do something. But one thing I want to stress is that this was manufactured by the British state under the guise of multiculturalism. And really, it seems to me, it's changing a bit now. I think we're having even more of a problem with identity politics, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it seemed to me that the only group that weren't integrating were really the Muslim community, because obviously they had such different practices, and their teachings would have mitigated against them integrating, and that led to a huge amount of these problems that we're seeing now with grooming gangs and terrorism and radicalization, and also the subversion of the British state and the subversion of our freedoms. So groups that engage in identity politics do not have the United Kingdom at heart. And now what we're seeing, very, very sadly, we're seeing a growing, if you like, black supremacist movement, an African supremacist movement, which is equally as bad as anything on a white supremacist side. And then we're seeing on the ethnic English side, we're seeing people gravitating towards I suppose what you call the ethno-nationalists. And I think the reason for that, and the reason that this is happening, is because of the policy of multiculturalism. And this is the fruit of it, because sooner or later, everybody is going to split into their little microcultures, and you're going to have a situation that's going to be kind of like Northern Ireland on steroids. And I can understand why people are drawn to that. I completely disagree with it. And anybody that knows me know that I completely disagree with any form of identity politics. My whole mantra goes back to Martin Luther King Jr. and his saying that, what we should look for is the content of a man's heart, or content of a man's character, rather than the color of his skin. And I still maintain that. So, but it seems we are where we are. We're in a situation where everything has been fragmented. John, how can we put the country back together and have genuine integration and a situation where people are genuinely proud to be British, no matter what their background? Is that possible? Because, of course, the ethno-nats and the identitarians in the Muslim community and the identitarians in the black community would say that's not possible. We can't mix together. We don't want to mix together. How can we have a cohesive society where, like it was when I was a youngster, where the only group that weren't mixing together were really the Pakistani Muslims, and everybody else was getting on, the African lads, the West Indian lads, the Indians, and so on and so forth? How can we put things back together? What do you think?
Richard, well, let me just give you a wee bit of my background. I mean, you already know the background, but this is for the listeners. I mean, I have a huge circle of friends within the Cameroonian, with people from Cameroon. I mean, I would attend regularly a place in Dublin, a place called All Nations Church, where a lot of people come together, and they come together because they want to be there. They're not being forced together. And I guess this is the reason why that I'm speaking about this, is that just recently there, before the COVID outbreak, what happened was that I mean, let me just give you a bit of my background. Is that, I'm in business. I'm a builder by trade. It was also, I mean, when I made some money, I bought into a computer software firm also, and I have a bit of experience along those lines. So, I guess that through previous dealings that I've had in the past, I met a man probably some 24, 25 years ago. And it turned out that this man, he was a professor from England, and he done some work up around the University of Edinburgh, I know. And in later years, he came to Northern Ireland, and I used to look after a house as a builder for him. And we got to talking, and we become friendly over the years. So as years went by, and we had this thing called the Belfast Agreement in terms of politics and whatnot. Out of the Belfast Agreement came a body called the George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace. And it just so happened that this professor that I knew through my business dealings, he was one of the people that was on the steering committee, I guess, of that George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace. So just quite recently, actually, before COVID broke out, and it would have progressed into something bigger, but I began an exploration with this man just to see, was there a possibility that what we could do is that we could actually try to talk about really what's going on in the country and how that people are really, they're becoming insular. You see, what is happening with people is people are actually, I mean, they don't trust their own, is the reality. So how do you expect them to trust other people with a different colour of skin that even has been around in the United Kingdom for a very, very long time? And you know, as this grows, this ethno-nationalism, we'll call about it, more and more people will be drawn towards it. So the conversation that I was having with this professor from the George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, who also works for the UN, and I said, you see, you people are getting this very, very wrong. And what did I mean? Well, you see, what they are doing is that I mean, they talk about this diversity, this diverse world where everybody has to buy into. Now, you and I both know, and the listeners will well know this, is that diversity doesn't include nationality, Richard. You know, if you're patriotically proud to be British and who you are, and if you want to stand up for your country and your heritage and everything that goes with it, in this new dispensation where they say that it is all about diversity, it's all about accepting other people. Well, it's about accepting everybody else, but your own people, and that's what it is that I think that actually fuels this ethno-nationalism, and this is why a lot of people are easily drawn into that line. So what I actually argued with this professor, and as I say, we got to the point whereby that we were going to have, you know, further meetings and whatnot, and the point was that I'm saying, surely what we need to do if we want to have a society where togetherness flourishes, what we need to do is we need to be fair. We need to make sure that everybody feels that they're being treated in a fair and equitable manner. And I says, and what we need to do is we need to actually take everybody's concerns into consideration, and we need to lay everything out there. And whether that be the Englishman who would have a gripe against, you know, Islamists for real reasons, because I've seen it for myself. I've seen how, you know, I mean, I was taken through Bradford by a man, and I have to say it was a very, very scary place. It's somewhere where I wouldn't want to live in or live near, and I can't imagine what an Englishman feels to be living in and around that area. I mean, the man that I met that took me through Bradford, he was a businessman, and he had been away in Australia for 10 years, and he'd done nothing but apologise the whole way through it. And he's saying, you know, John, I apologise. I says, look, you called him John too. I mean, what are you apologising for? He says, well, look, I left here 10 years ago and this place wasn't like it. It was actually scary, Richard, for us driving through this because everybody was looking at us and we were in a nice car and, you know, and we nearly thought, you know, they're going to attack us here. But all we were there for was for the purpose of business. And all that man ever done was to apologise. And I says to him, well, John, you know, back in my home country, I mean, there's no go zones also in Northern Ireland, you know, where like say, for example, people from the Shankill can't really walk up the falls for fear of getting attacked or getting beat. And as you pointed out, this is exactly what happened.
That's identity politics. That is identity politics. And you know, because one of the reasons when I got involved in the Patriot movement in the UK after really hesitating for many years, because I knew all this. You see, I knew what was going to happen because of my experience in Northern Ireland, because I had a real insight into Islam, and I knew there was going to end up you know, an explosive conflict. And when I got involved in the movement 2.5 years ago, I was saying this to people, saying, do not go down the road that we went down in Northern Ireland, because it's not a good position to be in, where you're scraping bodies off the street, where your friends have been killed, where you've got terrorists trying to kill you. And that is a distinct possibility. If we all go down the identitarian route, it leads to hatred, it leads to bigotry, and it can lead to violence and terrorism, and to all sorts of civil unrest. Because what, you know, when you talk to the ethno-nationalists, and they can put up a good argument. Some of them are very articulate. They can put up a very good argument. But when the rubber hits the road and you say to them, okay, you want your ethno state, which is predominantly white British. Well, we don't disagree with that. We're not disagreeing with the fact that that the UK should be predominantly made up of the ethnic group that it comes from. I 100% agree with that. But if you get to the stage where you're going to offer people repatriation, or you're going to encourage them to leave the country because of the color of their skin, then that becomes extremely problematic. Because I think about my colleagues that I served in the military with, who were brave, hard, patriotic men, black lads from West India, Somali lads, and so on and so forth. Those guys would have stood next to me and died with me just as much as a white lad from Middlesbrough, a black lad from Keighley would have given his life for me in exactly the same way. And if you're going to go to those people and say, well, because your granddad came from Jamaica, we're going to offer you a repatriation package, that is not going to lead to community cohesion, and that's an understatement. And so I think that's a huge issue that they can never address, and they can never give us proper answers on that. But at the same time, they use the absolutely correct analysis that we've far too much immigration. It's the immigrants that are coming in are not assimilating. The vast majority of immigrants that are coming into the country now are Muslim, from a Muslim background. I know it seems like I'm harping on about this, but it's important to get this across. And the problem that you got with the ethno-nationalists, they don't talk about Islam because I think they don't want to, because they know there's a huge cost when it comes to talking about Islam for some reason. Well, the reasons that we can go into on another video, but there's a huge cost. So they won't address that. So what they address is the race issue. Now, my point is this: if we can get our migrant and immigrant friends to be proudly British first and foremost, and when I talk about British, I'm talking about embracing the whole of British culture, warts and all. Of course, there's things that the British have done badly in the past, and there's things that the British have done fantastically. But the problem that we've got is, because of the education system, because of the media, and because of people in politics, they are pushing the indigenous population towards the ethno-nationalists. So in other words, the government policy, the way the BBC, I'll give you a prime example. I was watching the daily death toll, the daily body count of COVID-19. It's pretty grim watching. And a guy from the Muslim News, whatever that is, got to ask a question of Michael Gove. The first thing I was thinking was, well, I wonder if the Christian Post would get a chance to ask a question of Michael Gove. Probably not. This guy from the Muslim News starts asking a question, and straight away he starts playing the race card. He starts attacking Trevor Phillips, who incidentally is black, and is looking into this whole issue of why people from ethnic minorities seem to be disproportionately being affected by COVID-19. And it was almost like, the questioning was ludicrous. It's almost like he's implying that the coronavirus is a racist virus and it's only attacking brown and black people. 75% of the people that are dying are white. And of course, when this narrative is put out there, people are watching this, are going, look, the ethno-nationalists are right. Because look at the way the news has been presented. If we look at the news content, it'd be very, very rare that you would see an interview with a white working class family that would show that white working class family in a favorable light. It would be extremely rare. Whereas when you go to see the Bangladeshi, the Pakistani, the Somali family, they're shown in such great light, or they're shown as victims. So what's happening with this is the media, the government, the establishment have created a monster because they have alienated the majority population in the United Kingdom. Absolutely. And I think it's quite right and fair for white English people to say, we are being dealt a bad hand here. We are being treated unjustly. But the answer is not to go with ethno-nationalism. The answer is to go with a nationalism, a civic nationalism that says we embrace everybody of every background that embraces British culture, supports British culture, and wants to build a successful United Kingdom. Because what people are missing in all this, and this is a really important point with identity politics, identity politics is the globalist dream. Because if you can split people, it's like Northern Ireland. If we can split people into Catholic and Protestant, Irish and British, instead of having And of course, what we've got in Northern Ireland is we've got the fox in charge of the hen coop with Sinn Féin been in government, because they want, their stated aim is to destroy the state of Northern Ireland. That's what they want to do when they're in government. And we've got exactly the same mirror image in the UK with people from the Muslim Brotherhood and the extreme left being in power and positions of power, and their aim is again exactly the same, to destroy the United Kingdom. So what we've got to do is we've got to embrace people who, no matter what the colour they are, I'm talking about in England now because obviously Northern Ireland is slightly different, but we've got to embrace people from whatever background they're from. If they're Muslim, if they're black, if they're Indian, if they're Chinese, if they're white, people that genuinely love the United Kingdom, love its history, and want to see it prosper and want to see it do well. And if we manage to do that, it would take the wind out of the sails of the people that are pushing identity politics. Because what identity politics will do is will create these micro groups that will fight against each other. It will weaken the cohesion of the United Kingdom. It will weaken the United Kingdom as a state, and it will mean that the United Kingdom eventually becomes ungovernable, at which point a globalist government, a globalist elite can say, we can take over your country, we can make it work because we can sort out the problems that you've got. The problems that you got were because of nationalism. They weren't because we pushed multiculturalism on you. They'll be saying the problems that you've got are because of nationalism. And that is the way that they will use identity politics, as they've done in Northern Ireland. They'll use identity politics to destroy the nation state. So we've got to be cleverer than the identitarians on all sides, including the Muslim fanatics, the Black Power people, the white supremacists. We've got to do it in a lot cleverer way, because most people that came to the United Kingdom in the 60s, the 50s and 60s have fully integrated. The only group that hasn't fully integrated is the Pakistani Muslims. Most West Indian guys that you'll see will be drinking the pub with white guys. It's what's happened is we've had a huge problem because of the massive influx of immigration. We've had a huge problem that those migrants have not integrated because there's just been too many of them have come in. And that's the issue that needs to be solved. But we're not going to solve it by hitching our horses to a cart that's going to take us down a road of leading to even more segregation and even more, racist and identity driven politics.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
It does. And, on the subject of me, you'd asked me the question just previously there, Richard, about how would it be solved? And I'm going to give you my honest opinion. And this is, talking to, as I say, these people are making policy right around the world, this George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace. And, I had a 3.5-hour discussion with this man. And, I'm pointing out that what they are actually doing is that by trying to remove people's identity, what they're actually doing is they're pushing more and more people towards this English nationalism, this British nationalism, and people are withdrawn into their own communities and they're becoming insular. And, and why was I saying that? I'll tell you why, because whenever that I had asked for the meeting, I sent him off an email and I got a huge admission from this guy, I showed you it and I showed another friend it at the time. And, what this guy had actually said, he says to me that, Britain for the British and Ireland for the Irish, he says it's pernicious and politically dangerous. And I couldn't believe, I nearly fell off my seat. And, as we thought at that time, this is huge for a man to admit that. But however, did we know what was coming down the road with this whole corona pandemic and the push for this globalization like we've never, ever seen before? So you ask how that it can be solved. Well, that was my attempt by asking to meet this man, to go to plead with him, to say that, look, what you don't see that's going on in the background is there's right around Europe at the minute, this, people are actually withdrawing into their own communities and they're standing together and where they would have actually, where they, let me just stop that, Richard. Sorry about that. I should have had that turned off.
That's okay.
Where they would have actually, had friends from other other ethnic backgrounds and whatnot. It's now getting to the point where they're standing with their own. So how do we solve it? Well, we can't solve it whenever the official line, whenever the government policy would be that you're, Britain for the British and Ireland for the Irish and France for the French and so
It's
on and so forth,
pernicious.
German
It's
for the
perceived as
it's
pernicious.
pernicious and politically dangerous. So we can't solve it whenever this is the official line. And what's the official line? Well, I mean, that's the globalist line. And if I could explain it, and then I'll just cut you straight into what's happening right now in a place in Dublin where I think it really is the answer, is the truth of the matter. But I mean, I went to Liverpool not too long ago for my birthday in around November time. And we visited the Beatles Museum, and there I came across the display there for John Lennon. And do you remember that song, Imagine?
Oh,
Imagine no country. It isn't hard to do.
dreadful.
Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Just you go through the words of that song, and
That's where these people got their ideology from. That's where these,
I came to the
the people,
realization.
yeah, the people that are running our world now are 1960s and 70s hippies and early
Absolutely.
80s hippies, and communists, and they hate the nation state. They want to destroy the nation state, and they want identity politics, because then they can do what they did in Northern Ireland, say, look, that's where it gets you. That's where clinging to your flag gets you. It leads to destruction. And of course, that's what they want, because the globalists they are psychopaths. They do want to run the world. They are extremely dangerous. I mean, I'm not saying that there's a smoke-filled room with all these gentlemen. Well, they're not gentlemen. These creatures sitting around plotting to take over the world. But there is a plot to have a one world government, and it's falling apart because of Brexit, because of Trump. And they are trying to do anything they can. I think it's very interesting. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think it's very interesting that the two countries and the two political ideologies that are going to be hit most by coronavirus are Trump and the United Kingdom under Boris Johnson. Now, that's just something to think about. I'm not saying that this has definitely happened and that this has been pushed upon us to destroy Brexit, to destroy Trump, but it seems very interesting that the two countries that are going to be hit hardest by this are the United Kingdom and the US. And, it's very convenient, put it that way. The other thing is, thinking about the coronavirus, one of the problems that we've had in the UK, and this is where you've got to look at Boris and say, great, let Boris get his Brexit. But that can't be the end of it, because Boris is a globalist. Boris has stated that he wants to bring more migrants into the country. He wants to bring the whole Commonwealth into the United Kingdom. Well, there just isn't room to bring the whole Commonwealth into the United Kingdom. And what will happen is what's happened with this is, one, there's a brain drain from Commonwealth countries. The NHS is a prime example, and thank goodness for the nurses from the Philippines that have come over and given fantastic care and treatment. Many of them are Christians actually as well, given fantastic care and treatment to people in the NHS. But that's doing two things. One, it's draining resources that are being sent from the UK back to the countries that the nurses and doctors come from. But also, it's draining the best nurses and doctors from India, from the Philippines, from African nations. We are taking the cream and bringing them to the NHS and depriving those countries of the health professionals that they deserve and can actually look after them, so that they're left with not only a third-rate health system, but a health system that is literally run by people that probably shouldn't even be in the profession, because all the good doctors have left and gone to the West, and that's something that these people that talk about open borders and globalism, they don't care about the third world. And they don't care about the white working class in the United Kingdom either. You used to hear the way Anna Sauber used to speak about the white working class and used to say, well, look at the Muslim community. You're so much better than the British white working class. Look at the way they talked about the British working class when it came to jobs in the fields and all that sort of thing. So that the mainstream political establishment, I believe, have betrayed our country. They betrayed us to China. They betrayed us to Saudi Arabia. They betrayed us to Pakistan. They betrayed us to anyone that will pay their £1 million salaries when they leave politics. I mean, so this is what we are fighting, a massive battle. And
Absolutely.
what worries me about the people that are going down the identitarian route on our side, on the with the ethno nationalists, that they will it'll be very, very quickly they're going to become part of the problem instead of part of the solution, because what they're going to do is offer more division, where what we've always been about is let's stop mass immigration 100%. We don't need it. But the people that have come to this country and have integrated, let's embrace them, and let's
Absolutely.
deal with the people who are trying to destroy the country wherever they're from, whether it's IRA Sinn Féin, whether it's Muslim fundamentalists, whether it's the far left. Let's deal with those people and beat them politically and beat them in every other way that we can, and have a country that is totally cohesive and works, because otherwise we're looking literally down the barrel of a gun. And I, for one, do not want to see civil unrest in the United Kingdom that's going to lead to the sort of situation we had in Northern Ireland 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it'd be foolish. I mean, one of the things, Richard, which really, I guess, that made me realize was, I mean, I remember in late 1993, it was one of the bloodiest years in terms of the Northern Ireland Troubles. And I stood on the Shankill Road not very long after the Shankill bomb. Now, that's set aside that some of the people that were killed in the bomb were, one was as good as a brother to me, and other people were my very good friends. And I can remember before I even knew that they were in the bomb and they were killed, I remember looking at it and thinking that this has to stop,
Yeah,
because over the years we had seen so much trouble, so much strife, so many coffins going down the Shankill Road where I lived back then. And I honestly believed that it needed to stop. And honestly speaking, I mean, I knew a lot of the people that were involved in an uprising against it, even from the Protestant unionist end of things. And I know deep down within their hearts that they wanted it over, because generally they were good people.
yes,
I mean,
absolutely,
there was an old
absolutely,
say there was an old saying back then, and it was that their only crime was loyalty. And what
absolutely.
was it loyal to? You see, it was loyal to the crown, loyal to the queen, and loyal to being Britishness and being having a birthright. Yeah, and that was a big thing, and holding a British passport. And most of the people that I knew back then, I mean, that's who they wanted to be. They just wanted to be left alone. And if it hadn't have been for the aggression that was turned against them, there wouldn't have been a backlash, and
That's
that was the
exactly right.
reality.
That's exactly right. And I think that's one of the
Yeah,
things that the British government has got to realize in the UK. The British government's been very lucky. And
yeah,
if you look at what happened, let's take two problems with the Islamic community in the UK. Let's look at the grooming gangs. Now,
yeah.
it's believed that 1 million girls may well have been raped by these gangs, and I think it could be more than that, because when I was a kid in school in the 80s, there was late teenage Muslim men picking up white English girls at the school gates in Middlesbrough, and that was in the 80s. We know that they were involved in the heroin trade. So the grooming scandal is off the chart. And one thing about Northern Ireland, and I hope I'm right in this, that would never happen in Northern Ireland. I'm not going to say any more than that. I don't believe that the grooming scandal would ever happen in Northern Ireland. I'm amazed that there hasn't been more. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting this should happen, because that would be an extremely dangerous thing to say. But I'm just amazed that there hasn't been more retribution wrought on those grooming gangs that have done that by English men that have said we've had enough of this. That's one thing. The other issue that, so the British government's been very lucky to get away with that. And the other thing is the terrorism that was unleashed in 2017. I think if there'd been one or two more attacks, we'd have been in a situation where we wouldn't have been able to stop what was going to come down the road. And I know that the state watches our live feeds, and that the people in we're all aware of how the intelligence services work. And I think if it could be fed into the government, that there will, the British people there will come a point where the British people will say, we are not going to put up with our little girls being slaughtered on the streets by jihadis. We're not going to put up with our little girls being raped, gang raped and hooked on drugs by the rape jihad. And I remember the Shankill Road bomb. I remember actually the morning of the Shankill Road bomb. It was very strange. I felt nauseous even before the thing happened. It was the weirdest feeling. And then when it happened, I was totally sickened by it. I just remember so many of the attacks, John, as well. And I remember friends been murdered, friends been maimed, legs been blown off, men losing their testicles in bomb attacks. These are things that we've lived through, and we saw. Having the IRA try to murder me on several occasions. So we've seen that, and I don't want that for the UK. But the UK government has to act and has to do something, because sooner or later, we've said this for years, we are the moderates. We are 100% the moderates. And what's going to happen is, if we can't affect change by doing what we're doing through peaceful means, through peaceful demonstration, through trying to get engaged in politics, if we can't achieve that, what comes after us will be far more dangerous, far more vicious, and far more uncontrollable. So the government has got to realize, denying us a voice, putting people like Tommy in prison, arresting people on trumped-up terrorism charges, is not going to stop what's going to come down the road. Or maybe, you see, this is the thing, John, do the government, because they're globalists, do they want this so that they can then clamp down on it from a great height and basically crush it with force of arms? I don't know.
I think that we've entered a new phase, is the reality. And previously, let's take you back to the Northern Ireland context, and I'll tell you what our political leaders were telling us for a very, very long time, and the media was pushing out exactly the same thing. And what they were telling us was that we needed to be open and inviting to others. We needed to attract people from the other community to vote for us. We needed to embrace people in order that they would vote for us politically, in order to save the union. So some of us actually took advantage of that. And what I mean was that, I don't think they actually meant is that you should be pushing out and literally trying to persuade people to join you politically, because that's exactly that what myself and some of my friends have done, as you well know, that we completely reached out to Irish nationalists who are, let's not, make any mistake about this, is because their identity is under threat also.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I done a lot of, scooting about in Southern Ireland, talking to genuine people, and I was absolutely amazed at some of the people and how friendly they were, how accepting they were of me. And I mean, I spoke at an event there, I think it was just before Christmas there, and I was well accepted by the whole group, I have to say, and a lot of them have became my friends. In fact, we've done some interviews with some of those people. And Richard, the reality is, and this is what I've been arguing, even with people from up here in Northern Ireland on our own side, and people that I know in England, I've been telling people that we all live in a goldfish bowl. And what we tend to think is that it's happening to us, that we're being victimized, but we're not. You see, it's happening right across the globe. And, a lot of us who do look, we actually see how other people are being hammered with exactly the same things, and how that everybody's identity is being removed. So I'm actually, in my honest, where am I at in my stage? Well, I'm looking at the whole globalist thing, and I'm just beginning to understand. And I'm going to say something, but I've never seen Corona coming, is the reality.
Yeah.
And I never seen the opportunists and how that they would actually latch on to Corona in order to try and force this globalization. And I believe that we're closer to globalization than we think. And the unfortunate fact is that we can't rely on our politicians to fight this.
Or the media. We can't rely on the media. I mean, the thing about the coronavirus, I mean, whether it is a conspiracy, or whether it is, I personally believe that something nasty leaked out of that lab in Wuhan. Now, here's an interesting thing. I made a video about a month ago when I actually had what seems to have been the coronavirus. I made a video about a month ago, and I said, where were MI6 when that virus leaked, and when they realized that this was being transmitted human to human, they realized it was a pandemic. Now, a report has been leaked, or an MI6 source has leaked the information that the government were warned by MI6. So I couldn't believe that MI6 wouldn't be all over this. So MI6 warned the government in January that there was a pandemic coming their way. Now, if I was a prime minister of any country, and the Australians and the New Zealanders got it right, if I was a prime minister of the United Kingdom, no matter what the cost to the economy, because the economy has been thrown off a cliff now anyway, no matter what the cost of the economy, as soon as I knew there's a pandemic coming down the road, first thing I would have done is closed all flights from China. I was in London at the end of January when we knew that there was a pandemic coming. And I'm not saying this, I'm not bigoted against Chinese people, but the place was coming down with Chinese people for the Chinese New Year in London, right?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't seem to be actually the source where most of the infections came from. When it hit Italy, like a tidal wave, they should have closed all flights from Italy down immediately. Planes have been coming in right the way through this pandemic from across the world, with people packed in there like sardines without any masks, and then being allowed to walk into the country, go anywhere they want. And why? Because Boris Johnson is ideologically a globalist. And I'm not criticizing him for it. I'm just stating it as a fact. Boris would not close the borders. And if he had closed the borders, people like the panicking Piers Morgan would have absolutely castigated him for it. The Labour Party would have gone after him for it. Yeah. So the problem, what's led to the coronavirus is globalism. And we've been told that the solution to the coronavirus is more globalism. It's insane. It's insane.
Absolutely insane. Yeah. And look, and we're conscious of the time here, Richard, but there's something that perhaps we could do another video on, and that would be, globalization and the opportunists that would use, for the rights or wrong of where coronavirus comes from. I mean, that doesn't matter, is the truth of the matter. It's what we see clearly are people, as I say, opportunists using corona in order to try to force their own way. And I mean, whether that be Blair, whether that be Clinton, whether that be, all of these newcomers to the equation, and there's quite a lot of them. But I mean, we know what they're intent on, and they're intent on bringing together globalization is the reality. So that would be a very good video. And just on one point, and you can close, but let me explain one thing. I watched a video the other day, and you're talking about Boris, and I feel that people really need to go into this in depth. Is that I think the video was from last year, where Boris, late last year, where Boris was he was speaking to the UN, and Boris knows the same things that we do. Boris is concerned about the same things as we are. Boris is concerned about globalization. Boris is concerned about these tech giants taking people's freedom of speech away. And he raised it with the UN. And I say, why raise it? We need somebody with balls that's going to say, we're being no part of this, and we won't be any part of this. This is our country, and in the United Kingdom, we do what the United Kingdom people do. And we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of expression. And if the social media giants want to operate in our country, well, people shouldn't be shut down. And if there's, look, listen, there are people that needs to be shut down. You know that, I know that. But only
if you're inciting violence, or you're telling people to go to Syria and fight in jihad against the Russians, then you're
acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. You should be clamped down on, like Anjem Chowdhury and people like that. 100%. Yeah.
Well, totally acceptable, but only after that they clearly state something that is contrary to British law is the reality. But for people to have an alternative opinion, like yourself, like Tommy, like all of the other people, like Katie Hopkins, like whoever, that these social media giants are playing God with, who has a right to speak, who has a right to have a view.
The problem with that is, John, it came from the British government. It came from Yvette Cooper. It came from David Lammy. It came from, the laugh of it is, I think the deputy leader of the Labour Party is now a Muslim gentleman. And he's the one that just got Tommy kicked off TikToks. So TikTok's a Chinese-run social media. I don't use it. It's something to do with video sharing or something. But Tommy was on that. He's getting a platform. Bang, he's gone. Now we've all just migrated across to VK, the Russian Facebook, and so far so good. But how long? I think, to be fair, I think probably Putin will just stick the fingers up at the UK if they turn around and say kick Tommy off. He'll just give it the middle finger and say on your bike, you're not on. And obviously he'll be doing it for cynical reasons to score political points, and that's the way world politics works. But that's what I'm hoping. but it's terrible that we have to go to a Russian platform. My goodness. When I was a child growing up, the Russians, we used to laugh at the Russians for the way they clamped down on freedom of speech. Now the boot's totally on the other foot, and we're actually using a Russian platform to promote freedom of speech. It's ludicrous what's happening. But what I want to do, John, because I know this has been a good feed, and we've covered a lot of ground, but I want to close on a positive note if we can, because obviously when you talk about these things, it seems to be it's all what the problem is, and there are solutions to this problem.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that we're talking a long process. We're talking a very, very long process. But I think we can continue to do street protest. I think street protest is very important. The state hates it because it costs them thousands and thousands of pounds to police it. But peaceful street demonstrations, I think, are vital to continue with. So that's one of the building blocks that we can use. I think political parties, I was talking to Anne-Marie Waters last week. She's not the only political voice out there, but I think Anne-Marie's extremely courageous. She would be on exactly the same wavelength. Well, you've met her as well, John. She's on exactly the same wavelengths as us. Hopefully she'll manage to get it together and start organising Northern Ireland and Scotland as well as in England. There's other groups like Hearts of Oak, which are doing a fantastic job at organising activism and video feeds and doing what we're doing a lot of live feeds and educating people. And there are people in the establishment who are with us. There's not many of them. I mean, and they've got to keep very quiet. But there are people in the establishment. I mean, we can talk about Lord Pearson because he's out there and he's nailed his colours to the mast many years ago, and he's a bit of a pariah in the House of Lords because of what he says, and I would agree with just about everything Lord Pearson says. But again, those people are few and far between. So what we need to do is we need to. I spoke to Ian Paisley Senior many years ago when he did the deal with Sinn Féin, and I just went up to him. I said, "What did you do that for? Why did you do that?" And he looked at me like the little upstart that I was, and said, he kind of snarled at me a bit, and he said, "Well, Richard," he says, "you can't fight against the centre." Now, I've taken a long time to think about what he meant by that. What we've got to try and do is move our argument to centre ground. At the minute, our argument is deemed to be extreme, conspiratorial. We're just working class louts, walking through the streets, shouting, and so on and so forth. But the reality is there are a lot of people who are educated, who understand what we're saying, but they're too afraid to speak out because there's a price for speaking out and doing what we're doing. We've nothing to lose, but when people have something to lose, they won't speak out. So what we need to do is facilitate people speaking out, and the more people see a Tommy or an Anne-Marie or a Douglas Murray standing up and speaking out on these issues, the bolder other people get. And I think we're still building that head of steam, but we've got to move quickly because I think time's ticking on. The other thing that we've got to do is we've got to really look at the education system. There's a vile creature that goes on GMTV or GMB or whatever they call it from time to time. I think he's professor of black studies at some university in England. He hates the UK with a passion. He hates white people with a passion. He's vile. He's disgusting. It'd be like having Nick Griffin on Good Morning Britain every week. He's a vile individual. And this man goes on and mocks Winston Churchill, talks about slavery, and it's dreadful. There's loads of them. The Good Morning Britain seems to give them a platform. Now, those people need to be challenged at every single level, and the education system. These people in the education system that are brainwashing our young people of all backgrounds that Britain's an evil place. They need to be reminded that Britain defeated totalitarianism in 2 world wars almost completely on its own. They need to be reminded that Britain sent the Royal Navy round the high seas and arrested and imprisoned slavers and slave ships and set the slaves free. They need to be reminded that William Wilberforce, an English Methodist, part of the aristocracy who could have had a fantastic career in politics but dedicated himself to seeing slavery abolished, that William Wilberforce single-handedly abolished the slave trade, and again the Americans caught on a little bit later. And they also need to be reminded that the slave trade was something that was absolutely endemic in West Africa because of Arab Muslims who had taken it down there from North Africa, and North African Muslims, who had been basically dealing in slaves for probably almost a millennium by the time the British and the Americans got there and got their little sticky fingers in the barbaric and wicked slave trade. So we need to remind people what our history is and why we can be proud of Winston Churchill, of the Magna Carta, of Oliver Cromwell, dare I say it, because if you mention Oliver Cromwell in a pub in Ireland, you're likely to get strung up by your fingernails. But the reality is all of these people and all of these the King James Version of the Bible is another example. I mean, the King James Version of the Bible has had a huge influence on world culture. The works of Shakespeare have had a huge influence, but probably the King James Bible, more than any other document in history, has influenced world history and world culture. So I think those things need to be shouted about from the rooftop. And again, we need to look back at our Christian heritage. And I say that unashamedly. Britain was and still is officially a Christian country. You wouldn't think so. You would think it was actually a Muslim country, the way things are portrayed. So those things need to be claimed back, and we need to be very, very vocal and articulate in standing up for those British values, which are basically values of, we boil them down to four things: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought, freedom, equality, genuine equality, not the crazy identity-based equality, but where everybody's equal before the law, democracy, where one man and one woman have one vote, and sovereignty. Yeah. And if we get back to those four principles, we've got a chance of turning this thing around and actually winning the fight and making Britain great again, as to steal one of Donald Trump's phrases. Anything you want to finish on, John, or are you?
Yeah, just in closing, Richard, and this is something for the people in England and the people in Scotland to listen to, I guess, is that I became involved with some people who would traditionally be seen as my enemies, let's just say, in the not too distant past. And the reason why I did, all right, somebody tried to phone me there, so I'm back up again. I'll just,
good stuff, yeah.
And the reason why that I did become involved with these people is that, they came to me and they said to me, something, we're being treated exactly the same way as you are, and if we don't help you save your nationality, our nationality would be under threat in exactly the same way. So we really should work together, respectively, helping each other to fight for each other's national identity. And when you break that down, I guess in England and in Scotland, there's other people there who may not agree with you politically and everything, but at the same time, they want to be English, they want to be British, and they don't like the influx of people that's coming into their country in an uncontrollable way. So we really need to be bold.
And they are absolutely right about that. We shouldn't have uncontrolled mass immigration is catastrophic for any nation. It's a social experiment. It's never happened before. It's an invasion. It's not immigration. It's an invasion, and it might not be with men with machine guns and tanks, but it's an invasion, and it's about destroying our culture, and we've got to fight for that culture.
And the last thing the globalists want, Richard, is for us to get together with these people who they stir us all up against each other.
Exactly.
And whenever we break that barrier, we have a chance of getting a foothold and building on that foothold. And look, if the single greatest asset that we have is for us to be courageous and to go out and to start talking to these people and having conversations with those people. And one person that I will mention here, and I'll mention Tommy. And recently I've seen Tommy talking about the Muslims at the school where they weren't too happy with their children being taught in all sorts of, sexual stuff. Let's just go that route. And, at the end of the day, there's somebody that you could stand along with, stand alongside, and perhaps you find a mutual interest, and at the end of the day you can break down barriers, and maybe people then start to sort of listen and begin to respect each other. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to amalgamate with Islam, because I don't think that's possible. However, really and truly, I wouldn't say don't close your door to anybody. Go and talk with anybody. Go and present your case,
I,
and show that you have a better way than they have, in the hope that, who knows, someday you could persuade somebody to join
I
your side
agree.
of the
I think where we made a lot of progress was with the ex-Muslims,
yeah,
people who'd left Islam and understood Islam. I think there's because of the nature of Islamic scripture and because of the nature of Islamic theology,
yeah,
if somebody is a committed Muslim, it makes it very, very difficult for you to
absolutely,
sit with them on a level playing field, because obviously even in the Quran itself it says that Jews and Christians are the worst of creatures and that Muslims are the best of creatures. So
yeah,
from that point, or the best of people, so from that point of view, it makes it very difficult to have an open and honest dialogue with people who are theologically wedded to the Quran. Now,
yeah,
it's totally different when we're talking about people who are nominal Muslims, who don't really believe in all that stuff, and who are ex-Muslims. And I think there's a lot more ex-Muslims and nominal Muslims than we realize. And again, yes, we should be having a dialogue with those guys, and helping them understand why Britain is such a great country. If they don't understand it, helping them understand that.
yeah,
And I think that's
absolutely,
there's something in the book of Proverbs that says, "He that winneth souls is wise," and there's a lot in winning someone's mind over to your way of thinking. And I agree with you 100%, John. You've got to find people of goodwill in all communities to work with them and get them to believe. We can't get them believing everything we're going to believe, but get them to believe that the United Kingdom as an idea and as a state and as a country is the best. Until recently, until we got this mass immigration and everything that's been going on with it, everything that's come with it. But the United Kingdom, I believe, was the best country on the planet, the most tolerant, the most peaceful, the most law-abiding in many, many ways, apart from, things like the problems that we had in Northern Ireland. And that's been undermined and destroyed to a great extent, quite deliberately, I believe, by Tony Blair and his cronies. And
absolutely,
that's what we need to fight back against. But we need to do it, like you say, in a way where we can. I mean, talking about being with our enemies, I have a friend, I'm not going to say where he's from because it might put his life in danger, but I have a friend in the south of Ireland who was very, very senior in Sinn Féin, and he was thrown out of the party because he took a stand on mass immigration, on identity politics, against all these things, I must say, against abortion, against all those things. I don't think he's a particularly religious man, but he realized that all these things were very, very damaging to Irish identity and to the Irish people. And he is a true patriot. And I'll stand with him all day long. And I'll stand with a Sikh man who says, I am proud to be Sikh, but I'm also proud to be British. And I'll stand with a Scotsman who says, I'm a Scotsman, but I'm proud to be British. And I'll stand with an Ulsterman who says, I'm an Ulsterman, but I'm proud to be British. And what we need to get away from, because if we split down into English, Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish, we're going to get absolutely nowhere. We're just going to, like you say, we're going to be in that goldfish bowl, and we're going to be saying, no, I don't trust him because he's English, and there still is a lot of anti-English sentiment out there.
oh,
And, to me,
absolutely,
I'm British first and I'm English second. And that's my identity. I'm a British patriot.
Same here, Richard.
Yeah,
the same here. Yes, absolutely.
And I'm a unionist, and I believe we've a great argument to make for maintaining the union. I believe we can win that argument with our Roman Catholic neighbours in Northern Ireland. We should be able to win that argument with Scottish people as well. They've already kicked the SNP in the teeth, once on a referendum, and then they got the enemies of the UK got kicked again in the Brexit referendum. So British people are proud of our country, and we should be proud of our country. But that doesn't mean that we have to slip into an extreme, dangerous ideology that's gonna be damaging to the state and lead to all sorts of unforeseen consequences. Well, John, have you anything else to say, or is that are you happy?
Yeah, just in closing, and this is something to sort of go out with. What we've been talking about in the South is that, and this again, it applies right across the United Kingdom. And as I say, that I honestly believe in going and speaking to people that we otherwise would perceive to be our enemies, or the people that would absolutely oppose us, in terms of, ordinary indigenous British people, English people, whether that be Scotch people, Northern Irish people, whoever. And what we did is we took a theory from a guy called Ian Adamson, and I'll not go into it, but this is something we can
Yes,
discuss
that's
again.
the guy from the
Uh,
the Heritage Centre, yeah.
Absolutely, Dr.
Yeah,
Ian
great guy.
Adamson, and he had a theory called common identity. And when he talked about the common identity, I mean, as I extended on it, I talked to Ian Adamson died quite recently, and I went and talked to his counterpart. It was a lady called Helen Brooker, who wrote the common identity theory along with Ian Adamson. And whenever I had spoke about it, I says, I would really like to use that theory, and I would like to try to use it to reach out right around these islands, the British Isles, including Ireland, to bring people together, in order that what we can do is we can stand together and we can help each other save each other's own national identity. And what we talked about was that not only do we have a common identity in that we share the British Isles, but we have a common travel, which has been around for many and many years, where each and every one of us can travel around these islands unabated with no hassle whatsoever. So we have that common travel. And what we actually extended to is that we now have a common enemy. Why? Because there are people out there that wants to remove all our national identities, who say that we are pernicious and politically dangerous if we want to stand up for our nationality, if we want to be patriotically proud of who we are. So there's where we are at the minute when in our outreach to the south. And I have to say, we have formed many alliances with many, many great people who otherwise would have been perceived to be our enemies, but not anymore, Richard. So I believe it can be done, and I'll sit down with anyone and show how it is that we done it. So I hope that's been beneficial.
That's fantastic, John. John, thanks for taking the time out to have a chat. We'll have to try and do this on a regular basis. If we just pick a topic, I don't know whether we get it done once a week, because we don't want to set too high an expectation. But exactly. But if we can do this on a regular basis, John, and we'll pick a topic every week. And I mean, I think a lot of these topics overlap anyway.
Absolutely.
So, great. Well, let's try and do it again soon, John. We'll pick another topic. We'll advertise it next time. We'll do it live next time so that we can have some interaction, and have some people commenting on what we're saying, and maybe take some questions from some people. But I think for the first live stream, John, I think I think we did okay with that, and let's do it all again soon. Okay, John.
Richard, thanks for having me.
Okay.
Thank you. Now,
God bless. Bye bye.